Hi, ladies. I'm Stephanie Smith with the Columbia Mall, and I am actually the outgoing co-chair of the monthly program committee. It's been a great honor to serve on this committee for the last few years, and I am deeply appreciative of everyone for sticking with us over the last roller coaster year that we have had. I have the honor of introducing you to our speaker today, Jan Grossmann. Jan is going to share a little bit about the history of Women's Network, because as we mentioned, we are celebrating 40 amazing years with our network. Jan has actually traveled all the way from North Carolina to be with us. We're really appreciative that she was able to make it and share her experiences with us. And she's going to give a short presentation, and then at the end, we are going to open up the floor for some questions. So if you think of any questions, keep them in the back of your mind, and we'll come around with the mic at the end and you can ask. Jan was an active participant in the Columbia community and the Chamber of Commerce for over 40 years. She has a long history of running successful businesses in Columbia, including 15 business startups. She has served as the executive director of the Boone Hospital Foundation and is president and publisher of the Ad Sheet, which she co-owned with her husband. She jokes that he started the business and she made it successful. From 2012 to 2019, she developed hundreds of women leaders across the state as the executive director of the Greater Missouri Leadership Foundation. During her years in Columbia, she also gave her time in many board and commissions, including the boards of the Chamber of Commerce, the Ronald McDonald House, the United Way, the Griffith Society. She is a past president of the Columbia Rotary South and was known as the underwear lady for her organization of the Underwear and Sock Drive for the Salvation Army in Tucson. In 2019, Women's Network was proud to recognize Jan as the recipient of the Athena International Leadership Award. In addition to all that, she is one of the founding members of the Women's Network. Who recognize the lack of connection available for women in business in the Columbia community and set out together to create the organization that we all enjoy today. So we have everything to thank Jan for us all being here. Please join me in welcoming Jan.
So, who is that woman that they have? Everyone has long hair now, right? Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today and help celebrate this great organization that I really love. We have amazing, outstanding members and awesome, exceptional leadership. Thanks, Stephanie, for the nice introduction. I've often joked through the years that I'm the oldest living member of the Women's Network. However, as we celebrate 40 years, I believe that it may actually be true. It's thrilling to me that literally hundreds of women leaders and men have been helped in reaching their full potential due to the influence of Women's Network in their lives. I can't really adequately describe my pride for having been a key leader who helped create, define, and shape this wonderful organization. I'm in awe of what Women's Network has become and how much the network benefits Columbia area leaders, thanks to the many other leaders that we've had during our 40-year lifetime. So just a snapshot of a few of the exceptional women leaders from the first few years provides exciting and inspirational insight into the talents that contributed to our growth. Debbie Schuster has been one of the very top principal agents in the country for at least the past 25 years. She was our number 11 president. Janice Schuerman retired a couple years ago from MFA Incorporated as the Senior Vice President of Corporate and Member Services. Janice was number 6. Deb Snellen is currently Executive Director of Organizational Development for Lake Sumter State College in Florida, and also previously served as an executive leader in Mizzou's Office of Advancement. Deb was number 9. Melanie Jones was a general partner with Edward Jones before moving on to Steeple Nicholas and then retiring. Melanie was number 2. Vicki Dunscombe served as Executive Vice President for Boone County National Bank before retiring. Vicki was number 4. So you can see great leadership from the very beginning. I'd love to tell you that the founding mothers had a grandiose plan to develop this organization, or even a simple plan to start it. Actually, my husband said that I could tell you pretty much anything because none of you were there at the time. However, the honest truth is that Women's Network grew out of needs of the time. Needs of women, needs of a struggling chamber, and simply needs of the times. In 1980, the population of Columbia was 62,061 people. The Chamber of Commerce was not the strong, vibrant organization that you know of today. In fact, it was a very small organization that was struggling financially and struggling to retain and grow membership. There were about 500 members. There were fewer than a dozen female members of the Chamber at that time. There was no business showcase. There were no quarterly breakfasts. You could join a committee and you could attend the annual meeting. That was it. Times were different for women then too. Women business leaders yearned for opportunities to meet other women business owners and managers. We were not invited or even allowed to join civic organizations. For example, I was a JC wife as the spouse of a member of JC's. We were the cookie bakers and helpers as needed, but certainly not members of JC's. I was also a Rotary fan as the wife of a member of Rotary, again assisting with civic projects, but certainly not members of Rotary. In fact, it wasn't until 1984 that women were invited into JC's. It was 1987 for Lions Club, Kiwanis, and Optimist, and 1989 for Rotary. So yes, many of you were young children by the time that this occurred. It was very recently. The issues facing working women of the time included availability of childcare, job opportunities, income gaps, time management, credit availability, and backlash from non-working women who thought we shouldn't be working outside the home in the first place because we were taking jobs from men, and it was terrible for our children for us to not be in the home. So back to the chamber. I served as a member of the Small Business Committee. The chamber's membership director, Georgianne Porter, reached out to the Small Business Committee, reached out to the Small Business Committee to assist with a membership drive aimed at recruiting women who were business managers and owners. In the fall of 1980, we held a reception with a speaker addressing one of those issues I mentioned, and we drew nearly 40 women to the event. They loved it. They wanted more, and word spread quickly. So before long, our Women's Network subcommittee of the Small Business Committee had become large and had outgrown the overall committee. The chamber executive at that time was a woman who wasn't particularly open to helping us. And she, frankly, was unpleasant to work with. Basically, she was a thorn in our side. But in her defense, think back to what I said about the chamber. She was running an organization that was struggling financially and struggling for membership. And Women's Network was only an expense of time and money to her anytime we asked for help. Our first president of Women's Network was Tony Summers. Tony was the owner of a photography studio down on Broadway, She was a forward-thinking, enthusiastic business owner. She had very little patience for the way we were being treated by the chamber. So I always describe myself as a flaming moderate. But I would describe Tony as a bra-burning liberal. So you can see some friction. So in the spring of 1981, just a few months after we began, we hit a major snag, a major roadblock. It became unlikely that Women's Network would remain a part of the Chamber of Commerce because steering committee members were talking about breaking off instead. And actually, a majority of steering committee members, including President Tony, favored breaking away. I knew in my heart, however, that if that happened, Women's Network would likely fail. We would lose the support of area business owners and management, who at that time were mostly male, but were very supportive of the network. I convinced my friend Melanie Jones that that was the case. And so Melanie and I used every connection that we had with members of the Chamber Board of Directors to negotiate what we thought would be an acceptable solution for the steering committee, with the goal of keeping the network part of the Chamber of Commerce. We approached the Chamber Board of Directors and the president, who was Bob Roper at that time. Bob was very supportive of the network, and other board leaders, including Richard Mendenhall, Jose Lindner, and my husband, Larry Grossmann. All of those men were very supportive of what the network was accomplishing. So after considerable behind-the-scenes conversation and negotiation, the Chamber's Board of Directors agreed to approve a resolution that, one, opened a permanent seat on the Board of Directors for a representative of Women's Network. And number two, designated Women's Network as a division of the Chamber of Commerce rather than the subcommittee of the Small Business Committee that we had been. Once that was approved by the Chamber Board, Melanie helped me sell that commitment to other members of the steering committee. And we obtained agreement from a majority of the members to remain within the chamber. It was a pivotal moment for us. But it was also a very painful moment for all of us that were involved. President Tony Summers immediately resigned in a fit of anger and frustration. At the time, I had a 2-year-old son, and I had just learned that I was pregnant with my second child. I felt like I could not take on the role of president, so Melanie stepped forward to become the second president of Women's Network, and I became the third president a year later in 1982. So while there were no grandiose plans to develop the network, there were caring, smart, and energetic women and men who helped keep things moving forward. It wasn't smooth sailing always. Early on, communication was a challenge. There was no internet, no Facebook page to like, no email, no cell phones. So we communicated by creating and mailing a flyer each month. And I was lucky that Larry and I owned a printing company and could donate that for the first couple of years. I'm sure that each past president could recall issues raised during her tenure. Certainly Michelle has experienced things that no one could ever have imagined during the last year. So history. Why do we take the time to share this with you? And the reason is because we want you to understand that you're just like me. You too have the potential to lead and influence. So I encourage you, step forward, join committees, volunteer, volunteer again, volunteer if you're not asked, volunteer if you're turned in. But step forward and lead the network for our next 40 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan, for that amazing recount of the history that I've never heard either. So this is a big day for, I think, a lot of us. We'd also like to open the floor for some of the members that she had mentioned in her speech that we have here with us today. And they're going to come up to the microphone here and tell a little bit about their story as well. First, I'd like to invite Betty Schuster.
And that truly was amazing. It was amazing. We can all see how you've been so successful in business and life. So thank you for that. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to share my personal experience with Women's Network and how it helped me in my career. I started out working at a local bank after I graduated from college, and I had heard about Women's Network and attended my first meeting. And I remember that meeting very clearly, but I think it was at the old Flaming Pit restaurant. So I'm showing my age here. But what I do remember is that Janice Schuerman was at the podium. And I remember sitting in the audience, and Janice not only introduced herself, I'm Janice Schuerman, physician, but she told us about the company that she worked for and how successful they were and how large they were and what she did for the company. And she was really teaching us how to promote ourselves and our business. And at that moment, I remember sitting there thinking, I want to be like her. I want to be confident. I want to be professional. I want to be part of this organization. So I started coming to more meetings, and I made an effort every meeting to sit at a table where I didn't know anyone. You know, it's always easy to sit by somebody you know, right? So I sat by somebody I didn't know. I collect business cards, and I volunteered. I volunteered to serve on committees, became a part of the steering committee, and then eventually was president of the organization. I will mention that our steering committee meetings were early in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, because we either didn't want to miss work, we needed to be there at 8, right? Or we weren't allowed to miss work. Back in those days, it wasn't always, many businesses were supportive, some businesses were not supportive. As part of a privilege of being the president of Women's Network, Jan mentioned that you served on the chamber board, and that opened up just that many more contacts and business opportunities to get to know other people. So the relationships that you develop in Women's Network, and personally for me, the relationships of getting to know other people has just been invaluable. If you need something, reach out and ask. Women and men, I don't want to leave any men out here either, but that's the way you get things done, okay? In my business now, when I have an open position in my office, I start calling people that I know. Who do you know that would be good in this position? Who do you know that would help me get this done? So in closing, I'm grateful to Women's Network, what it's done for me and what it's done for others. I'm also grateful for the lifelong friendships and business relationships that have endured over the years. Thanks for letting me share just a few minutes.
Thank you, Betty. Next, we've got Deb Snellen.
Hello. I'm so honored to be asked. I live in Orlando, Florida now, and I came back just for this. Michelle gave us the opportunity to speak there. But I wanted to be here. I wanted to feel the energy. I wanted to feel the synchronicity. I'll use that word again later. I chose to be Women's Network president. I think you said I was number 9. The year I was pregnant, so there was something going around that. Pregnant, and I want to be aware of that. But like many of us, we choose to do it all at the same time. So having a daughter in the year that I was Women's Network president just seemed to be, it was just what we did. You've heard about some of the chief issues, and I was reflecting on the plane last night about some of our issues. Yes. We needed support for our professional growth and our professional development. I remember dealing with the Carrie Frankie issue. Carrie Frankie, as you know, I believe there's a scholarship that you give for Carrie Frankie. And the year I was president, we had a Carrie Frankie issue, and that issue was she was a courier. She had lots of demands on her time, yet we wanted her to come to all of our meetings. And I remember having a meeting literally in my living room, like, how are we going to deal with this very important person, but we needed her in our meetings. And I don't think that's something we would talk about now. We would find a way to make that work. And I also remember talking about what we were going to do with the men that wanted to join Women's Network. Why is it so important? Then and now, we have so much in common. We all wanted to listen. We wanted to learn. We needed to link and leverage and lead. We wanted relationships. We wanted to promote our businesses. We wanted a voice, and we wanted a seat at the table. We wanted to do business with each other. We wanted to further our careers, and we just wanted to have fun. And I don't think those things have probably changed. Women from this organization have been some of my greatest examples of mentors and advocacy. And even many, many years later, I needed Betty Schuster a few years ago, and she was there for me. And I see Janice and Jan, and it's great to still see, and other past presidents that are in this room too, my dear friend Pat Hostetler, I haven't seen for a long time. I will also say, this is the only negative thing I'll say, but women sometimes have been also my greatest example of disrespect in the profession. Something we just can't afford to do for each other. Which brings me to synchronicity. We can change a lot of things. There's also a lot of things we cannot change, right, when you're president. Things are happening all around us. So there's this whole word called synchronicity, and I find that maybe Carl Jung came up with it originally, and he defined it as a meaningful connection, a meaningful coincidence of 2 or more events where something other than the probability of chance is involved. I love that definition because you chose to be in Women's Network. You chose to be here today. That's not chance. So I want to read to you just one short paragraph from one of my favorite books, which is called Synchronicity. The capacity to discover and participate in our unfolding future has more to do with our being, our total orientation of character and consciousness, than with what we do. Leadership is about creating, day by day, a domain in which we and those around us continually deepen our understanding of reality and are able to participate in shaping the future. This, then, is the deeper territory of leadership, collectively listening to what is wanting to emerge in the world and then having the courage to do what's required. This is the organization that helped me learn how to listen, lead, link, leverage, and lead again. You chose wisely. The people in this room are here for you. After 40 years, there's no doubt that we have synchronicity. And the success of Women's Network is not a coincidence. It was built on the success of many women. So I just want to say best of luck in the next 40 years. Happy birthday, Women's Network.
Finally, Janice Schuerman.
Not sure why finally, but I will tell you, after sitting out there listening to Betty, I feel compelled to introduce myself and talk about my business all over again. Actually, I was invited to share some thoughts about early days for this network, and I find it hard to believe 1981, 40 years ago. When I came in this room earlier, I started looking around and I thought, you know, most of the people here weren't even in the workplace 40 years ago. And in fact, some of them weren't even born 40 years ago. But anyway, 40 years ago was actually a different era, and Betty have already sort of alluded to that. But it was highly unusual in those days for a woman in business to be in a leadership role 40 years ago. And if she was, it was assumed that it was a title only, that she had no real responsibility or authority. So 40 years ago, it was so unusual when a woman was named vice president that she'd more than likely get a call from a local TV station wanting to do an on-air interview. In fact, in those early days, in Columbia, a woman couldn't even go to a store and on an installment plan buy something without her husband's signature. And if she wanted to go to the car dealership to buy herself a car, more than likely, she'd be told they'd be glad to talk to her when she returned with her husband. And 40 years ago, if she attended a national business meeting or professional training program, she could easily be the only woman in attendance. And most of the male attendees assumed she was there to take notes or serve coffee. 40 years ago, there were a lot of inaccurate and actually ignorant assumptions made about females on a regular basis. Assumptions that affected a woman's ability to do the job and to advance. I want to give you a real simple example about assumptions. It was 40 years ago that I moved from a downtown Columbia apartment to my farm. I went to a local rental establishment to line up a box truck for that move. Now, mind you, I had been driving farm trucks, tractors, and commercial-sized vehicles for more than 20 years. However, they wouldn't let me leave the lot without a man driving the truck. Now, that's a simple example of what was a broader problem in those days. In those days, women just were not viewed as being capable of handling many tasks. For the most part, the workforce, women were invisible, their contributions and accomplishments went unrecognized. Now, did that mean that women weren't doing meaningful work and that they weren't managing business affairs 40 years ago? Well, no, you know they were. But in that era, as a group, women were simply not viewed as leaders, and most weren't promoted or paid accordingly. Now, it was during that period of time, and Jan did a very good job of outlining that a handful of progressive Columbia women like Tony and Melanie and Jan organized the Women's Network. It was Vicki Dunscombe who called and asked me to join. When I first joined the steering committee, we met in where we met in those days, in the back corner of a McDonald's restaurant. And then later, in the back corner of the dining hall at Columbia College, where we met at 7 a.m. on a weekly basis. Because in those days, as they said, the staff of the chamber was very small and they didn't have any resources to help us. The steering committee did almost everything for the network. I eventually served as secretary and then as president. In fact, my ex-husband used to refer to it as the business suit mafia. While I was on the steering committee, several of us went to Kansas City one evening. There was a women's professional organization that was similar to Women's Network that had been in existence for several years, and we went there to learn. As it turned out, their mission was very narrow, and they targeted executive women only. By design, their fee structure and their meeting schedule made it difficult for women in emerging positions to join. But we took what information we thought was helpful, but concluded that Women's Network needed to be more inclusive. Now, over the years, I've been asked, what was the benefit to me of participating in Women's Network? I initially thought about developing new contacts and promoting my business. I'm now retired, and as she said, I was corporate secretary and senior vice president with MFA Incorporated. In addition, for more than 30 years now, I have owned and still operate a full-service boarding facility for horses. I'm proud to point out that the chamber actually named that Small Business of the Year several decades ago. That's Chapel View Stables, if you're looking, Chapel View Stables. So for both those businesses, I know the value of promoting your business. However, for me, I feel the biggest benefit in participating in Women's Network was the sharing of expertise and networking. Networking was extremely helpful, as Betty and Jan and Debbie have already said, because long before there was an internet, if you needed an answer or you needed a resource, all you had to do was call another Women's Network member. And for that, I want to publicly express a sincere thank you to Linda Arnold, she's here, to Vicki Dunscombe, to Deb Snellen, and Chris Marks. Made a big impact in my life over the years. Now, fortunate women in my age group had the benefit at some point of male mentors and enlightened male bosses who encouraged, counseled, inspired, and promoted us. In Women's Network, we have a place where we can do the same for others. In addition to business promotion and networking, 40 years ago, we were also intent upon publicly recognizing women for their contributions and their achievements. We also wanted to increase women's participation in city and county councils and boards. Now, in closing, I have one additional thought, and that was that this last Monday night, Chamber annual meeting, Dr. Janice Schuerman was presented with the Deb Snellen Outstanding Business Women's Award. While accepting that award, she graciously acknowledged the groups and the organizations that had contributed to her success. One of those was Women's Network. So I'm very proud of what we accomplished 40 years ago, but I'm actually more excited about what the Women's Network is today. And for that, congratulations and keep up the good work.